just chatting about the VMware converter and what this tool does. In short, it is a mechanism that allows you to convert directly physical machines to virtual machines, or of virtual machines of other types to virtual machines that are supported by the vSphere format. All of these we want to chat about here, and then a little later on in that next nugget, we'll spend some time actually discussing, okay, well, how do we manage the virtual machines that we've ultimately created? Now you'll see here I have vc.company.pri, and this is the same vCenter server that we've been working with thus far. And I already have a virtual machine created. Here's VM6, and I also have a VApp created we'll talk about here in just a minute. This virtual machine, VM6, just basic installation. It is currently running because you can see the little green VCR button or VCR arrow here that associates the fact that it is running. It is VM version 8 because it was newly created atop vSphere version 5. I got one CPU, 2 gigs of RAM, certain memory overhead that I'm currently using. The VMware tools are currently not installed. The state is powered on, and the host is esx2.company.pri. So here for this virtual machine are some of the basic, just summary things that you can use to take a look at this virtual machine. A little bit later on, we'll talk about how you can assign resources to it and what types of resources that CPU or memory has the ability to use or maybe constrained by. I can view some performance statistics I'll take a look at a little bit later as well. The important one over here is this console for the virtual machine. Now, this VM, I literally just created the VM and I powered it on. And just like any physical computer, if I create that computer and I power it on and I don't have a DVD in the drive, well, it's probably going to boot to its BIOS. It's going to attempt to, with most machines, to try to grab information for a PXE boot. And then when it fails, it's ultimately going to find out that, well, there is no operating system found for this VM. So this is no different than what you would see with a standard server or even desktop that you would create when you just don't have an operating system disk or a PXE boot capability for rapid deploying the operating system. So let's take a look at actually powering down this VM. Okay, we don't want to actually play with this one. What we want to do is actually create a new virtual machine. I'll power this one off. And we'll create another virtual machine so you can see the process that one will go through to actually create that new VM. I will start here under esx2.company.pri, but you could go under esx1 to right-click and choose a new virtual machine. This brings up the new virtual machine wizard, which in many ways is no different than the new virtual machine wizard that you're used to seeing inside of VMware Workstation. There's a couple of additional settings here, but nothing really huge compared to what you're probably familiar with VMware Workstation. I'm going to choose a custom configuration here so I can see all of the additional bits that appear here on the left-hand side. If I choose next, I can name that virtual machine. I'll just call it VM1, for example. And next again, you'll see that I can select a resource pool. Now, I'm going to talk about resource pools in the next nugget, so I want you to just kind of assume that you understand what these resource pools are for just a minute, and I'll explain a little bit more about them when we get into that next nugget here. If I choose the next button here, that brings up the storage selection screen, and if you remember that over the previous nuggets, we've actually created a couple of different links to storage. Now, the first one is this data store 1, that is the local storage. You'll see here it says single host. We also created an NFS storage, which connects into that Windows box, and this is, in this situation, a fairly low performing storage, so we're probably not going to use it for virtual machines. The third piece of storage that we have here is VM Data Store 1, and if you recall, this is a multiple host access piece of storage. I have both ESX1 and ESX2 that are connected into this, so this is the storage that I want to use for this virtual machine so that I can later go about doing the vMotion types of things that I want to do with this VM. I'll choose Next. And I want to ensure that I use Virtual Machine version 8 so I can enjoy all the new features. And in this case, I'm going to use Windows Server 2008, a 32-bit edition, just simply to get around any of the confusion that may occur when I'm doing nested virtualization. Now, in a production environment, you would be able to do 64-bit, but because I'm doing ESX inside of Workstation. It just makes things a lot easier here if we just run with 32-bit OSs to demonstrate a lot of the things that we're working with. I am going to click the next button here, and then you'll see I have CPUs. I can choose how many CPUs I want, no different than how I did this inside of Workstation. Same thing with the memory size here. I'll set the memory size down to just a gig, but this is exactly the same how we did it inside of VMware Workstation. Same thing also with the network connections. Now, there's an important note here in the fact that the number of network connections that you have and where they will connect to is going to be directly related to how you've configured those vSwitches that we talked about back in the networking nugget. Now, if you recall, we created a VM network port group.